In our podcast this week, we are going to talk about sibling dynamics in families with PDAers. Such an important topic, especially for those of us who are moving into summer. We're often bringing our kids together into shared space a lot more. There's vacations. Their expectations really shift. And regardless of when you're listening to this, if you have multiple kids and one of them is PDA or many of them are PDA, then you know that siblings are super tricky. So let's dive in. Before we do anything else, I want to talk about how we define PDA here in case it's the first time you're hearing these three letters or in case you're still struggling to understand how we define this complex disability. PDA is a complex neurobiological disability. Those three letters can stand either for pathological demand avoidance or pervasive drive for autonomy. It is a disability within the neurodivergent spectrum that often connects deeply with the autistic experience and with ADHD in an overlapping way. And it leads to a hypersensitivity to threats and a primary drive for autonomy. PDAers are allergic to control in all its forms. Our threat response, and I should say I identify as a PDAer, which is hard. PDAers always really struggle to self-identify because we don't want to be hemmed in by any kind of an identity. But still, I have found that naming this truth about me has opened up so much self-compassion and so many windows for other people who know me and love me to also understand me. So our threat response is just below the surface. And any challenge to our freedom, autonomy, leadership, and competency typically produces a compensatory response. So I'm going to tell you what that means to me. And before I do, I just want to acknowledge that so much of what I know and understand about PDA and about sibling dynamics comes from our own very real lived experience. Most of my observations are like watching in the wild, saying, what is happening with these kids? What's happening within me? How do I understand this? And how do I bring this into words? And also, as a field, as a community of PDAers, we would not understand anything in some ways about PDA, about the real core understanding without the work of Christy Forbes. And so much of this work draws on some of her early and absolutely groundbreaking realizations about the neurobiology of a PDAer. So let's move into this. Imagine if you had an internal scale that had to remain balanced. You didn't choose to be born with that internal scale, and you didn't determine that you are driven to keep that balanced at all times. It's just there, it's just true. And when a PDAer has an internal set of scales that are unbalanced, when they don't feel stable, when they don't feel even, when it doesn't feel right, we will right that balance in any way we can. Sometimes it's subtle and undetectable, and sometimes it's blatant and obvious. Many people call these various strategies equalizing or leveling or equity-seeking behaviors. And I want to say again that all of those terms and just the core understanding here comes from Christy Forbes. And I like the term rebalancing because to me it absolutely feels like a righting of the scales, both for me and also when I witness my kids do it. So that is the term that feels most inherently logical in my brain. And rebalancing happens so often within sibling relationships because this is where we feel simultaneously the most safe and the most threatened. So I want to give a personal example. I've shared this one before, but it's just like, it's how it lives, how this reality lives in our bodies. This one's kind of humbling. This is from me. My husband was responsible for dinner one night, and he was painstakingly peeling these carrots for our kids. And our kids like their carrots a certain way. So off he went. And meanwhile, I was caught in a particularly challenging sibling dynamic and feeling so frustrated and exhausted after parenting all day. And I looked over at my husband peeling those carrots, and I looked at myself caught in this sibling battle, and it felt imbalanced. I felt angry, I felt resentful, my internal scales tipped. He was peeling carrots and I was getting screamed at, and it didn't feel fair. And so later, as I was cleaning up, I noticed that he had carefully put all of those carrot peelings in the compost bin for us to take up to our community compost area. And I took that whole compost bag and I threw it in the trash. And I did it with gusto and a big old smile on my face, and I felt so much better. And that's the essence of rebalancing. And y'all, of course, there's some humility in admitting that we do these things. There's a part of us that wants to pretend this away and say we don't do it. But every adult PDAer I know does this. Sometimes it's with our conscious awareness, sometimes it's subconscious and almost compulsive. Sometimes we rebalance toward others or objects or even ideas, and sometimes we rebalance toward ourselves. And I don't think that this is just PDA reality, although I think that the level of compulsion and the pervasiveness of it is unique. But think about if you're caught in traffic and you're feeling incredibly frustrated about the car in front of you not moving at the right speed, and then one of your kids pipes up and asks to change the radio station because the song is annoying, and you snap back at them. That particular act, that's a dysregulation, obviously, but that particular kind of dysregulation and using control or power over another person in order to feel a little bit better is a human protective pattern. Rebalancing is not unique to PDA. It is a human trait. But in the sibling dynamic, with a PDAer, rebalancing is most likely to be externalized and intense. When we feel unsafe, we are most likely to equalize or rebalance against ourselves. And when we feel safer, it will more often be externalized. So depending on the birth order in your family and the presence of PDAers at different ages, you might see your PDAers feeling inherently unequal or lesser status than one of their older siblings. Because of birth order, because they're inherently younger, they're smaller, they don't have as much life experience, they feel less than, and so those scales are permanently tipped. You might also see your PDAer feeling safer externalizing, though, toward younger siblings. So because that is an environment where they inherently feel more confident, then that is a place where it's most likely to be externalized. So in our dynamic, rebalancing moves downward. Older siblings are flattered and fawned toward. Younger siblings have more of those messier dysregulation symptoms like aggression, yelling, name calling, and controlling what they do. And I just want to tell you guys straight, there is nothing easy about navigating rebalancing between siblings. Having a PDAer and a non-PDAer is crazy tough because the non-PDAer is usually leaned on heavily to accommodate their sibling. But having multiple PDAers is crazy tough because no one will bend. And or if you have an internalizer, one always bends, and that leads to another really challenging dynamic. And I just want to say having an only kid PDAer is crazy tough because there's no other nervous system around to provide stimulation or regulation, and they will often rebalance with one parent, creating a more sibling-esque dynamic with their parent, which is incredibly complicated. Or they might rebalance with a friend, a neighbor, a kid at school, or a cousin, in which case you have a whole nother family involved in your kid's dynamic. So I get this. I live it. When my kids get activated and into an unsafe or an unsteady balance, they hurt each other constantly, all day long. A sigh, a look, even just walking into the room can be enough to set off a cascade of yelling, name-calling, aggression, dysregulation. I've been living this complex sibling life for a decade, and we have hourly, sometimes minute-by-minute challenges to build a reservoir of wisdom and experience. So I imagine you do too. Many of you have needed to permanently separate your kids, sometimes in different households or with different family units for hours, days, seasons, to keep them as safe as you can. We have never taken or been able to take that more permanent separation step, but we have spent countless hours brainstorming innovative ways to keep our kids separate and safe when we haven't had any other options. And so as a parent community, as a PDA community, we can let go of perfection and self-shaming here. When your kids are dysregulated and they rebalance with each other, it doesn't make you a bad parent. There's no way to avoid every situation, to be proactive all the time. It's not possible. Sibling relationships are one of the primary places where we learn an essential human rhythm, rupture and repair. We learn to mess up and make it right. We learn to get hurt and to nurture our hearts as they heal. And I'm not of the dismissive, all kids fight, get over it mindset, because there's fighting that helps us grow and fighting that leaves lifelong scars. We all experience both, but as we seek more wholeness and healing in our families, our goal is to support our children in learning to fight well, to disagree with compassion, and to repair what's been broken in authentic ways. And for the remainder of this podcast, we're going to talk about how to do exactly that. I'm excited to share some insights on how we can support our children in cultivating these healthy and safe relationships with their siblings, where they can learn to rupture and repair alongside deep listening and being proactive. It's so tempting to blame or punish or teach or coach our PDAers in an effort to try to change these rebalancing behaviors. We think, oh, if they would just stop doing this, our life would be so much better. But rebalancing is something that we PDAers have to learn to befriend and understand. It's not something we can extinguish or carve out. Like all of our less than perfect parts, rebalancing deserves compassionate understanding. And you might have noticed I draw heavily on internal family systems theory for my work. And it's the understanding that we have no bad parts, that all behaviors make sense in light of who we are and what we've experienced, and that integrating our more shamed parts brings us a greater sense of wholeness, and it brings us more control and autonomy over how we live into these primary urges. Low demand parenting is about attuning and aligning with our kids' real capacity in a culture of radical acceptance. It isn't about changing our kids or making them different than they are. It's about saying, I love you and I choose you just like this. It declares that we are all worthy of love and acceptance just as we are. And so in a practical way, low demand is also a step-by-step method of identifying which expectations are not doable for our kids or for us in this present season. We look at those misaligned expectations alongside a deep exploration of what truly matters to us as parents and caregivers to discern what pieces we can wholeheartedly drop to find more ease in our family dynamic. With this low demand lens, we are declaring that we all do well when we can. So more traditional parenting tools like reward charts, punishments, consequences, the silent treatment, or lectures on proper behavior are both ineffective and unnecessary. We don't have to do that stuff because our kids do well when they can. And for PDAers specifically, all of those kinds of approaches, the traditional parenting approach, it's not just ineffective, it breaks down the relationship of trust and it deepens shame, which can have tragic consequences for our kids. So if we're not going to reward, punish, or shame our kids to find a way out of these awful sibling situations, what do we do? After all, so many parents say in fear and desperation, we can't just let our kids yell at, hit, or bully their siblings. And I get it. So let's talk about what actually helps. Number one, it actually helps when we have straight talk in our families about disability. Talk openly, honestly, and frequently about disability. Make it a regular part of the lens you use for yourselves and the world. If someone is struggling in front of you in a store, maybe they're taking longer than you want them to, or they're acting confused, instead of complaining, engage in a curious conversation about whether they in fact have a disability and need accommodations. Look around you at the buildings you go in, at the homes that you visit, and ask about structural ableism, like restaurants without wheelchair accessible entrances, or exam questions that don't give you multiple ways to respond. Name the various disabilities in your family as specifically as you can. So instead of saying like, well, he has PDA, so he just can't apologize to you, your kids deserve a more robust explanation, even the little ones. I might say something like, part of your brother's disability is that anytime he thinks he's losing control, his nervous system shuts it down. It's not that he won't apologize to you, it's actually that he can't. This is how his disability works. And as soon as he feels safe again, he'll be able to apologize in his own way. You may name other complex and interweaving disabilities like autism or ADHD or learning differences or ARFID or any number of other specific challenges that you have in your family. But again, be as specific as possible. So instead of saying, oh, she's an ADHD or that's just how she is, name it. Part of ADHD is that lots of people can't shift focus quickly, you might say. She just couldn't stop playing the switch to give you a turn earlier because it takes her time to shift focus. Plus, she's autistic, and part of her autism is difficulty with transitions anyway. So that was a double disability moment, and that's why it was especially hard. Again, that's just a script for how you can name the present tense realities that your kids are experiencing, and then add in a layer of understanding disability. Not that it excuses any kinds of challenging behaviors, because that's not actually what it does. When we name these disabilities clearly and honestly for our kids, we give them the ability to understand, to bring compassion, and to begin to be proactive about shifting their expectations and shifting the structural realities of our life so that our kids are better accommodated, because we know that better accommodated kids are much more able to show up as their best selves. The goal isn't to minimize these painful moments or brush off a sibling's concerns. Instead, we are modeling the importance of deep listening and holding space. We're empowering our kids with compassion so that they can have meaningful information about their sibling's disability. Try not to skirt around words like dysregulation or disabled, ableism, nervous system. These may feel too big or too complicated for your kids of a range of ages, including your PDAer. But actually, giving them these concrete terms, it's the same as naming body parts with the real words that go with them. We equip our kids with the words and the understandings that they need to understand their own lives. Number 2, don't compare your kids. Comparison is toxic. It is a magnet for shame and judgment and competition, and all of those are immediate triggers for your PDAers rebalancing behaviors. It exacerbates all of it. So imagine that each of your children are so singularly themselves that you couldn't possibly compare them to each other. Imagine if, but your brother can, or follow your sister, she's got it right, or at your age, I was doing twice that. Imagine all of that is wiped from your vocabulary. You have only this one kid in front of you, and no comparison exists for this specific human. There's no rubric for success or failure for this one marvelous, unprecedented human life. Even neurotypical siblings wither in a culture of comparison. There's the famous book, Siblings Without Rivalry, and it deeply encourages parents to save praise for private, special moments between a parent and a child without any siblings listening in. Public praise is really difficult for PDAers. And so in our family, we've simply shifted to a culture where we don't use public praise at all. Children often, oh, this is a quote from the book, Siblings Without Rivalry. Children often experience praise of a brother or sister as a put down of themselves. They automatically translate, your brother is so considerate, into, mom thinks I'm not. It's a good idea to save our enthusiastic comments for the ear of the deserving child. And I just want to say this is a book written about all children, including neurotypical ones. If even average children are translating praise into self-judgment, our PDAers are compulsively doing it. They cannot stop. It is how their brain is wired. It is how they see the world. And so public praise of anyone in the family can be incredibly triggering for rebalancing and sibling aggression. Number 3, and this one is so crucial, is creating opportunities for repair. We all need a do-over sometimes, especially those of us whose disability shows up primarily in our core relationships. When PDAers feel threatened, again, not whether or not the person intends to make them feel this way. When PDAers feel threatened, their automatic, autonomic, subconscious, out of control reaction is often a fight, flight, or fawn response. We yell, we name call, we punch, we pinch, we destroy, or we agree and go along with something even though it's not right for us. And then we get resentful or passive aggressive or angry or overwhelmed or shut down, and it's not pretty. We all make mistakes. We all hurt the people we love. This is part of being human. But it's especially a part of the PDAer's experience of being human. And speaking from personal experience, it really sucks to hurt the people you love or to hurt yourself in order to stay in relationships. Creating opportunities for repair is about much more than just say you're sorry or clean it up or pay for the thing you broke. Opportunities for repair means creating a culture of comfort around mistake making in your family culture. It means modeling healthy forms of conflict and open communication about our intentions and the impact of our actions. It means doing the work within yourself to heal your own broken relationships to making mistakes and your fears about hurting others or being abandoned. It means doing your darndest not to pass along the baggage of perfectionism or self-denial that has been passed down to you by your ancestors. Practically, we do repair in our family first by giving time for people's nervous systems to return to stability, no matter how long this takes, even if it takes days or weeks. We do not do repair work when people are still flooded with emotion or defensiveness. We cannot create meaningful repair when kids are emotionally shut down or caught in a shame spiral. And I just want to say right here, for those of you who are like, my kid cannot repair, my kid will never take responsibility. They never apologize. If I even approach the situation, they'll double down. I meant to do it. I hate her. That is a sign that your kid, writ large in their life, is still caught in a shame spiral. They are not ready yet. They're not stable enough in their nervous system to do meaningful repair. Genuine repair exists between two consenting people who care about the relationship enough and are safe enough to face the harm that happened. You cannot force repair. It just doesn't work. and it works against you in the long run. So if you have a kid who can't repair right now, that is a demand to drop. Don't try, don't force it, and don't expect it. Cultivate compassion and safety and let repair come later. And I said before that modeling for our kids what it looks like to own our part in a situation and create compassionate repair is one of the most important things that we do. So perhaps for a season, maybe a long season, if your kids can't repair for each other, all you do is simply model your own genuine ownership. So let's say that a fight broke out because people didn't take turns evenly on a switch. And one person got a longer turn, the other person felt like they needed a longer turn. Words are exchanged, blows, and we're all cooling down in our rooms. I would own, I forgot to keep an eye on the time. And so maybe when one sibling came to tell me that their turn was up, I was meaning to come and help them manage this, but I got distracted and I never did. And so I would say, I forgot. I got lost in my work. I wasn't nearby to help you with the switch transition. And I would apologize to each child individually and own how I hurt them specifically and how, if they felt able and open to it, we might work on a situational shift so that this doesn't happen again. Something like, what if next time I set a timer on the oven to go off when your turn is up rather than it being my responsibility? That way you can see the time ticking down and we'll all hear the loud alarm. After I've done my own repair work, and once both kids are stable and ready for repair, and again, assuming that they are even big picture in their lives able to engage in repair, we go forward with curiosity. First, I assume that they are both feeling harmed. They are both feeling defensive, protective, and in victim mode. And so I say, you got hurt and that sucked. Your sibling loves you very much and wants to do some repair with you. What would it feel like for your sibling to make it right with you? What would you want to see? What would you want to hear? What would you want to know? And again, if kids have slower processing speed or hate questions, then you might say less or simplify the communication. And then I go to one who did the harming, and this may be both kids. They both might have lost it and done things that they aren't proud of. And so once we've talked about how they feel from more of a hurt person's perspective, then we can access how they feel from a hurting person, the person who did the hurting's perspective. And again, compassion and curiosity. You got dysregulated, you hurt someone you love, and that sucks. I hate hurting the people I care about. Your sibling still loves you and wants to do some repair or healing. Is there something that you'd like to do or say to show your love? And then I shift into a coach or facilitator role, and I help each child move into the repair process with what they feel ready and capable of expressing and hearing. And depending on how things go, we might even be able to work together collaboratively to problem solve the underlying situation with ideas like the clock timer on the oven or whatever else led to the battle in the first place. And the fourth thing that helps with sibling struggle is low demand for everyone. One of the most important parts of implementing a low demand approach is internalizing and living this core message that we all do well when we can. So when we're having repeated conflicts or struggle spots, we back up and we say something is too hard here. I wonder what it is. I wonder who it's too hard for. And this is just as true for your siblings and for the parents as it is for the PDAers. And many of you parents have your own disabilities, your own chronic illnesses, your own struggle spots, as well as the siblings. We all deserve accommodation and safety. We all thrive with trust and connection. So letting things go across the board is crucial. Parents will often say about a non-PDAer or maybe a PDA kid who's more flexible or in a better, more regulated spot, they'll say something like, he can totally handle it. And that may be true in a vacuum, but in light of their siblings' level of dysregulation right now, The non-PDAer or the more regulated sibling may also need a break. They need to be let off the hook so they have more in the tank to respond to their sibling with patience and compassion. They need you to drop some demands for them to create more ease and trust in their relationship with you. You may need space to build enough trust that they can really tell you what it's like to have a disabled sibling who expresses their dysregulation by yelling at you all the time. It's so important to see our kids in their real life, the life that they live, the only life that they know, and not in the kind of perfect world or when your sibling isn't around kind of glasses. This is their one wild and precious life. This is all they know and all they get. Sometimes we try to protect our kids from this by trying to quote unquote treat them normally, but this doesn't translate for our kids. They want us to see just how hard this is and how hard they're working. They need some space to be the hard one. Family dynamics are tricky and messy and complicated. We easily get locked into a role rather than having room to explore the fullness and the complexity of our evolving self. All our kids want and need room to fall apart, to be difficult, to be needy, to be the hard one. Each kid needs room to make mistakes and make life more difficult for everyone else sometimes. Practicing low demand for each kid keeps our eyes trained to look for what might be too hard for this kid right now and how we can support them in letting those specific things go. The first thing you will likely see in your kid's eyes is relief. Finally, they don't have to hold everything together all the time. Finally, they get to be a mess. Finally, they get to be real. Practicing these 4 essential concepts within our sibling relationships of talking openly about disability, not comparing our kids to each other, fostering frequent opportunities for repair, and practicing low demand for everyone in the family dynamic will make a core shift for how your kids are able to show up for each other in compassion, curiosity, and in repair. And more than anything else, they'll also create some space inside of you as their primary grown-up. It'll give you more margin to have enough inside to show up for the daily challenges and the daily beauty that is your real parenting life.